All right. We're here today with Mr. Greg Proops. How you doing, Greg?
I'm good, Southpaw. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. I've had Boney M stuck in my head quite a bit lately.
Which one?
I've had a cross between Ma Baker and Rasputin, which, you know.
Yeah, Rasputin is the one that England. Well, I lived in London and they never stopped ever playing Boney M.
It's a wonderful song.
Yeah, they get it done.
Let's write a disco hit about what? You know, Mad Russian Monk.
Right? There's so many sort of obscure and awesome disco groups from England. I can't think of the cat's name who sang "I Believe in Miracles." He'd been a star since the '60s. There, he has that fabulous voice. You know, where did you come from, angel? And I don't know. They weren't letting a lot of black artists at the table in England, as you might say. There was also a fake Sonny and Cher called Cleo and Caesar.
Really?
Yeah, who donned the same, you know, they wore the fur elf vests and whatnot. And then fantastically, on Live at the Palladium on Sunday nights, there was two pigs that were the worst puppets in the world. And they were pretending to play guitar, and they'd always play like Everly Brothers songs. So it was two pigs, and they were called Pinky and Perky. And they would go, they'd speed it up, right? Bye-bye, love. Bye-bye, happiness. Hello, loneliness. I feel like I'm good. And I always thought that was hysterical that Pinky and Perky were like a thing in England.
Because that's
mind you, this was a while ago.
When you think of entertainment, two pigs,
right?
The Everly Brothers. Where did you live
Always
when you were in London?
Sorry?
What area did you live in London? I lived there for quite a while.
Oh, did you? I lived in various areas. We lived in Queensway for briefly, in a friend's flat that had wooden floors, and you could see into the flat below through the slats. So it's fantastic. You know, if they played music or smoked, everything came up, you know. And we used to just rent ab-fab videos from the video store and watch them over and over again. And there was a really good Indian, a curry down the way. So that was a frequent. Then we lived in Hammersmith, but it wasn't quite Hammersmith. It was Fulham, and you had to walk your ass back up. That only lasted a month. The best part of that flat was there was a little patio in back, which, as you know, in London, it's a big deal if you have any outdoor space. And the Concorde, this is how long ago it was, the Concorde flew directly over the house twice a day, right? In the morning and then again in the afternoon. And when it flew over, it was loud, like, you know, F1 fighter loud. And so we'd sit out there with our wine or whatever, and then the Concorde, and it was just this big. It was a small plane, but it made so much noise before it kicked into supersonic. When it was in its jet mode, it was the loudest goddamn thing I've ever heard, outside of a B-1 bomber in Oman, which is the loudest thing I've ever heard.
Wow. And
then we lived in Hampstead, which is where all the showbiz people, as you know. Our MP was Glenda Jackson, and this was in the 90s. And so we lived there for several years, and there was a flower guy on the corner, you know, as they do, standing outside all day, even in the winter. And every day I'd walk by and go hi. And after about 2 years, one day I walked by him and he went, "You're right." And then I knew that I was, you know, in the neighborhood. It took 2 years for him to acknowledge my existence. And I said hi to him every day.
You got to put in the work.
England's, especially then, I don't know so much about now, but they weren't easy friends, but they stayed with you. Whereas in California, people are easy friends, but then you don't see them later.
Oh man, one of the saddest stories I think of my life was when I moved to Kentish Town when I first lived there. And
I know that.
Yeah, right outside the tube stop, there was an amazing curry place. And every day I would go in for lunch, and the waiter just looked so sad. And I'd order the same exact thing every day, dal soup and saag paneer, for 2 months, like 5 times a week probably. And then one time I'm walking down, and I decide I'm going to try something different today. You know, I've had the same meal forever. So I go in, and I see the waiter. He gives me a slight smile. And he sits me down, and he says, "Dal soup, saag paneer?" And I had to say, "No, man, I'm sorry. Today I'm going to have, you know, whatever I was going to have."
Right.
And
Chicken biryani.
He hung his head, walked in the kitchen, must have gave someone else my order because I never saw him again, and I lived there for 2 more months.
Oh my God, that's so funny. You know, you crushed him. You crushed him. If he'd said, yeah, let me have the usual, he'd have been like, the kid's back. He wants the sock. No.
Smile even bigger, you know, made his day. But
yeah, no.
Regrets.
Well, that's the thing about London, isn't it? No one really walks around with a smile on their face. It's kind of a doer. It's a fabulous place, but it's, my joke when I lived there was people come up to you and go, howdy neighbor, how you doing? Come on over. We're having a barbecue. Because no one would ever say hi to you first.
No.
And then you go, it's like a secret club you get invited to, England. I remember Kurt Cobain hated it when he went there and said it was the coldest place he'd ever been because emotionally everyone's completely unavailable. And their idea of dating is to go out in a giant group and get really drunk and then shag each other and then never speak to each other again. I think it's like the dating process. Yeah. But I mean, I love them. You know, I've played there for 100 years, and they're kind of the reason why I was allowed to gallivant around the world for 1 million years and do everything, is because having any measure of success in England really allowed me to go to every other place. And, you know, so I love them. And we were talking about how many times we played there last year. And it's just, we have friends there that we've had for 30 years, you know, and so that's what makes it great, because we actually know the same people and have the same haunts and stuff, which we hope will stay open. I had a really good experience last year, Southpaw, with, I was in the movie Nightmare Before Christmas, which is from the early 90s. And Danny Elfman, who wrote the score and sings Jack Skellington, the last 5 years got it in him that he wanted to do the show live with a full orchestra. So they did it in Japan without me, and then they asked me to join. And I've done it at Hollywood Bowl 3 times, Brooklyn. Last year we went to Tokyo, Dublin, Glasgow, and London, and did it at Wembley at Christmas time. So last year was kind of hard to beat for me, and then followed by this year, which is, of course, this year's 1918 and or 1917. And so, but playing in London at Wembley, it's all built up now, you know, like that. It used to be cruddy and full of like chippies and curries and kebab. And now it's kind of built up, and there's a big food mall with, you know, the Thai food here and the artisanal burgers. And, you know, Wembley's in a real built up area. We stayed at a hotel that was Soviet level shitty. And that's what I really enjoyed. Like the refrigerator was warm, you know, like there was a fridge, but it didn't really get cool. And there was no closet. There was, you know, like the prison peg, like in Midnight Express. And, they checked us into a room. I'm sorry, you're going to hear probably leaf blowers. I'm in Hollywood. Okay. We checked into the room, and in the hallway was what appeared to be like a Buchanan barricade of mattresses and dead furniture upturned, and the smell of epoxy and paint, right? They were obviously redoing a room and gluing the rug in. And the smell was like, what does Martin Sheen say in Apocalypse Now? Like slow death, right? So my wife goes, no, right? And I go, I'll be right back. Ran downstairs, the horrible, horrible Eastern European lady that ran the place. And I said, honestly, I can't stay in this room. And she's like, what do you want? I'm like, well, to move to another floor that doesn't smell like glue and paint and have a barricade of dead furniture. This is London last year. I'm not talking about, and this is the Nightmare Before Christmas cast. You know, we're all staying, not Danny, but the rest of us are all staying there. So they moved me to another room, and that one, you know, the only good part was there was a McDonald's across the street, but you had to run across zebra crossing, dude. So you had to run across the traffic, right? Going both ways with the median and no railing. Just that part was pretty exciting. In order to get a kebab, my wife and I had to run across 3 different streets like Rome. And you're like, so that's the kind of thing that London is best at, really letting you down. And at the same time lifting you up, because then we'd go to Wembley and do the show with a fabulous orchestra, and the place would go bananas. for the show, and I would jump up and down for my for the bow, and exultant, right?
Yeah.
And the food was okay. The catering was okay at Wembley. And then you go back across to your hotel. And, and one night we asked the kitchen to stay. They said they'd make us something after the show. This is all of us, right? So there's dozens of us, and they made us some pizzas and shit. And they were kind of, like cold by the time we got there. They didn't like cook them when we got there. They sort of threw them at us. And then they closed the bar early, and we were all in there drinking. And you're like, you could stay open another hour. But England, money. As you know, harshing your fun is one of England's great skills.
So I've been a big fan of your podcast, The Smartest Man in the World, for years
Thank
now.
you.
You're very welcome. And one of the things I love is when you digress into concerts you've been to in the past, because they always seem to have this enormous sense of adventure and ridiculousness to them. I was wondering, what are the ones that stand out in your mind?
Well, now that you mention it, a couple. I went to see the two Tower Power and Cheech and Chong with my cousin Donny, who I rolled with for a long time. He moved to the Bay Area, where I lived in San Carlos, Belmont, little crappy white suburb, whitest place on earth, home of the Plain Yogurt Festival. And he'd lived in Arizona, and I knew him when we were little. Now we were teenagers, so we had cars and weed and, dangerous, and methamphetamine, which we called crank. And what was our other drug? Beer, and butyl nitrate, which was a form of amyl nitrate, like a cheap ass version. I worked in a mall, and there was this place across from where I worked, the restaurant, called the Mail Box, M-A-L-E, the Mail Box.
There you go.
And they sold Coke spoons, and it was just great. This is like 1978, right? So they sold vials and stuff, and they sold butyl nitrate in a vial, and it was called Craze or Waze, or I can't remember the name of it. Donnie might remember. And so we would get a bottle of that and fucking snort speed and do this shit and smoke weed and go to these we went to see Blondie and the Ramones, AC/DC, Queen, the Tubes, you all listen to the 70s, So
wow.
And then, so we went to see Tower Power, and Cheech and Chong opened. And this is what was brilliant. Very, very Second City style. 2 folding chairs on stage, and Tommy walks up in cholo gear with a headband on, and it takes out a thing and pretends to clean off his lowrider. Then he gets in it and fucking mime, right? And then Chong comes up on the stage and goes like this, right? So he pulls over, gets in the car, and he goes, "Hey, man." He says, "Hey, what's up, man?" He goes, "You got any weed?" And Chong goes, "I got mesh, I got Thai, I got lumbo, I got red," and starts going through a litany of 70s weeds, of which we did have a lot of strains then, even though not like now. And I remember thinking they were so fucking edgy. Then Tower Power came on, and I had an onyx pipe that I bought at the mailbox. Onyx, right? So it's that white brown stone that you put a little crappy screen in, and I'd loaded it with tie stick or whatever. So we lit up, and this was indoors. The Circle Stars where Sinatra played, and Ella Fitzgerald, and it was a cabaret.
Wow. And
it was in the round, right? And that's what made it horrible, Southpaw. This was in my hometown of San Carlos. The famous theater there was a round one, and I mean everybody played there. Go look it up sometime. It's like, I saw Ella Fitzgerald there. I saw Pearl Bailey there. I saw Patti Page, the Mills Brothers, Tower Power, Jimmy Durante. When I was 6, I saw Jimmy Durante. Yeah, my parents were old school, so that's why we saw all those, like Pearl Bailey and the Mills Brothers and shit. Yeah. Which I'm glad I saw, but
yeah.
But you could smoke weed inside. But what was great was the engine of the machine that turned the giant stage was loud, and I mean loud. So like, Ella would be up there, you can't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing in there. Clank, boom, whoa, right? And so Tower Power's up there, and the fucking stage starts to, so you could only see them 1/8 of the time, right? Because they were only facing you. for a minute and then they went by you. So they kept perpetually coming by, which is like, why, right? Why not just rope off one half? This was a thing. There's one place we play still with Whose Line. It's in New Jersey, I think, or upstate New York, and it's in the round. And they've done that. They've roped off the back quarter. So then you only play like this, like a gladiator. Oh, you're not amused? Then you only have to play 3/4. But every act that I saw there, the noise of the turntable was, and then when it stopped, it did not stop or start smoothly. It went like boom. And so everybody on stage fucking, and so the stars had to come from a star aisle, right? There was 2 aisles on either side. So the dressing rooms were outside of the theater. You weren't on anywhere near the stage. So you had to be brought down. So they had to walk by everyone every time. And you could talk to them. You could yell at them. You could.
Nice.
It was fucking. And then another good one we went to was AC/DC. Not so druggy, but we drove down to Santa Cruz Civic, and which is about an hour and a half from the peninsula where I lived, and over a mountain, right? You take this road like this Highway 17, and it's through a forest, right? So it's like The Hobbit the whole way. Then you get to Santa Cruz, and it's all serial killers and and dope and seafood, and the boardwalk with the giant Ferris wheel and the giant roller coaster, which is called the Giant Dipper, and is mortally terrifying because the first 2 minutes of it are inside, and it's rickety, and it's built at like in the 20s, and I don't think they've ever nailed a board back down or painted it, so when you're on that part, it's. In any case, we drove down to Santa Cruz to the Civic, and it was the Ramones and Blondie, or Blondie and the Ramones. No, I guess the Ramones were opening. Blondie had already had a bunch of hits, right? They passed them up a little bit, 79 maybe.
Wow.
And we were real high, and Debbie wore a Jets jersey. I remember that night. And the Ramones, of course, were just ridiculously great.
Yeah.
And yes, Zippy the Pinhead came out at the end, and they, gabba gabba hey, gabba gabba hey, the whole audience. So cut to, that was, what did I say, 79, somewhere in there, 78, 79. Cut to about 8 years ago. I'm on tour with Whose Line. So it's 30 years later. We played the Santa Cruz Civic. And I walk in and I'm like, I've been to this venue. And then I was like, oh God, I saw Blondie here when I was a teenager. And it seems so big in my memory. My recollection of it was that it was this ginormous hall. And when we got in there, it's a 1,500 seater, way smaller. So I walk over to the stage manager, who's a woman about my age. She's got her headphones on. And I go, I saw Blondie and the Ramones here in 1979. And she went, that was a good show.
Nice.
So she had been there, even though it was 100 years later. But the wildest one we went to was, I was with my friend Jay, and I've told this on a special I did, but anyways, I was working in Burlingame at a pizza parlor, and the guy who ran the pizza parlor sold crank and weed, which I discovered my first night working there. He didn't make me deliver it. Maybe unbeknownst to me, I was. But I did buy it from him. So you make a bunch of money and then you give it all to him, right? And he was not a happy-go-lucky guy, because he took a lot of amphetamine, and that doesn't make you blithe. Yeah, it makes you grumpy. And he, a former guest of the California penal system, I believe a short stint in the Marines, because he had all the, and the gold chain and the burns, and his dealer would come in, and that guy weighed 85 pounds, like he was thin, no shirt, a leather vest, and one of those leather Civil War hats, the kind that has the crossed.
Yeah.
And his girlfriend was, 3.5 pounds, rabbit fur jacket, tight jeans, giant platform shoes. And they had a Doberman pinscher. because I would deliver pizza to his house and he'd go, "Hey, pizza dude, all right." Because he talked like that, I assure you. "Hey, you want a bump?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, too much." And go into the next room, like the Broyhill furniture from the 70s, the white and blue, you know, the bureau set with the dresser and the mirror with the white mirror, you know, and then a giant rail of methamphetamine, you know, lengthy. And the Doberman, and I'm like, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry, he don't bite." So the Doberman's putting his nozzle up between your legs, and you're trying to do that delicate balancing act where you're snorting methamphetamine, but trying to keep a Doberman from biting you in the balls.
That one, yeah.
And so we got a bunch of speed, and we went to see, who the fuck was it? It was someone awful. I want to say it was like Ronnie James Dio and No Dice or something.
Wow.
Ronnie James Dio had been in what? Richie Blackmore, Deep Purple,
Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath. His heavy metal credentials are fairly
impeccable.
he did this a lot.
Oh yeah.
Long live rock and roll, long live rock. Kind of a shamanistic, long-haired. I can't remember what show it was, to be honest. And we parked. There was nowhere to park at the Fillmore. This is the Fillmore in San Francisco. It was on Fillmore and Steiner. In those days, the neighborhood was pretty nasty, like real ghetto. And it still has its moments, but it's a lot nicer now. And the Winterland was ruddy. The ceiling always, a piece of the ceiling or a piece of the floor always fell on me. Like I'd pull up a piece of the floor that I was on, or a piece of the ceiling would hit you in the head, because it was all parquet wood from like the teens. It was a beautiful place, but no one had taken care of it in 60 years. And they sold Cokes and hot dogs behind a screen. Like that's how you got food. So you pushed your money under, like it was. So there was nowhere to park. And we're idiots from San Carlos. And we're high and drunk. We were drinking tequila and snorting meth. And we're in my friend's Corolla. And so he goes, "Get out and I'll park," because it's a really small space. Like I got to get out before we park. So I get out. He's parking. A black Lincoln Continental comes down the street with red leather trim on the outside, black tinted windows, and wire spoke wheel covers. And I'm in the middle of the street, shit-faced. So the car is coming down the street. It's not doing anything out of the unusual, prowling even. And I, "Hey, fuck you, man." Fucking car stops or pulls back. Right? Window go. There's two fucking 325-pound Samoan gangsters inside, right? Their eyes look like COVID virus maps, just a red, sprouting, horrible, incandescent thing. There's weaponry hanging from the filials. They've got a steering wheel that's this big. That's one of those iron links, chain link thing. So, and they both turn to me and they go, and mind you, I'm like an 18-year-old who weighs like 4 pounds with long hair and glasses.
High and
There's some, right. Well, beyond. There's some kind of problem. And I'm like, oh, perish the thought. There's no problem at all. This beautiful evening, I came here to celebrate fellowship and friendship and amity, comedy. I thought I was just celebrating life in all of its single-digit glory as you drove by, and in particular, because if there's some kind of problem, we can deal with it. And I'm like, there's no problem at all. I bid you both a jolly good evening, and I hope that all of your travels are as safe as they. So finally they split. And I fucking, and paranoid. Now I'm no longer high, by the way, because it drained the highness out of me. And I'm sitting on the corner and I'm crying. And now my friend gets out of the car. He's finally finished parking, because the whole exchange took a minute. Or however long it takes to park, a couple minutes, right? Of him backing for it. He gets out and he goes, "What's your problem?" I go, "They're gangsters. And they kill me. They were going to kill me." He's like, "You're not dead." I'm like, "They know, but they were going to kill me. And they were gangsters." And yeah. So the stupidness that you can get up to when you're a suburban idiot is almost limitless.
Yeah.
But I think the shows then were, no bottled water, everybody smoking weed and cigarettes inside, decidedly drugs being done, people selling hash and acid, which seemed to be a very big thing in those days. You'd walk by a dude, and there was always a dude coming down the line. The queue would be going in, hash, acid, which I never bought because really you?
Yeah.
We would buy early at home. It
Of
also
course.
helped when I worked for a drug dealer. That made it a lot more convenient.
You mentioned AC/DC. I was watching last night. There's a video clip of them, like 1976, just hanging out on the streets of Covent Garden. And Bon Scott has no shirt on and impossibly short, cut off jean shorts. It's just a bulge. And they're just walking around the street in the middle of the day in Covent Garden.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's what you need to be a rock and roll singer, you know?
Yes.
That attitude.
Oh my God, he was so he really is that person. And he would say, they would go like, what's your gig? And he'd go like, I'm a rocker, man. I'm just like, it was all about chicks and being on the road. And he was ripped, right? He was always, you know, he wasn't good looking and he had no moves, but he could scream at the top of his voice. And he was the only thing that cut through that guitar assault. So I saw them in 78 and Donnie and I drove down to San José something, so a real shitty gig in San José. And not Civic, that's not too bad. I played there. Anyways, they weren't headlining, if you can believe this. This is like 77, 78.
Before
it was
they broke.
Right? It was what's his name? The guitar player, Ronnie Montrose.
Oh.
Ronnie Montrose with Gamma. This is after he was in Montrose with Sammy Hagar. Right? This is all Bay Area shit. So AC/DC was the middle act, and that's who we went to see, right?
Yeah.
And we dressed up at my house, and I have 2 pictures of us, Polaroids. I still have them in my garage. I found them during the beginning of the containment because I was going through everything, and I found a scrapbook from 1978 that had the dates written and everything very carefully in colored felt pen.
Nice.
You know, what a great month of concerts and shit, blah, blah, blah. And then pictures of me when I'd drawn all around them like a frame. And we're going like this, we're being total idiots. And I'm wearing like a tweed jacket and a long scarf, and he's got a ruffled shirt on and shit. So we get to, on the way down, we're smoking weed, and Donnie goes, let's just pretend to be English the whole fucking time and see if we can fool these fucking motorheads. And I'm like, I'll do it. So we get there, we put on these cod English accents, and fucking everybody's talking to us and ask us about England, and we're just lying, right? Oh yeah, Brighton, so it's great, you know, because you just, you know, and like, so that was 45 minutes in line of just pretending. And because we looked so fruitopian, everybody was okay.
Nice.
So AC/DC comes on, and they were just sensational. They're one of the best rock. The first time I saw the Clash, I think the Ramones and AC/DC were the most straight ahead, like, you know, fury, just fury, and really good and well practiced, even if they were high. And Bon had no shirt, the tightest jeans in the world, tennis shoes. Angus came out with the school uniform, the whole thing with the bag and everything. And then, of course, that's shed one by one by one. And there was no chanting Angus in those days, but he was already, we knew who he was. And there's part of the show that blew everyone's mind. One, their attack, because they lined up in a diagonal, right? It was Phil and Malk, is it? Who's it? Phil's back there, Malk and the other brother here, Cliff. And then Angus in front, and then Bon kind of a satellite, or Angus a satellite and Bon in front. So they came at you like that. And it was just, and Angus never stopped banging his head. Where at a certain point, you're like, you must have brain damage. Because I mean, wow, your sciatic nerve or whatever nerves in them.
I listened to Bruce Dickinson's autobiography a couple years ago, and he talks about, you know, he had the really long hair, and like really early on, he had to cut it. At first, he had to wear a neck brace because from banging his head, he was doing damage to his spine, which only makes sense.
Right? Oh my God. So they disappear from the stage, Angus and Bon. And so it's just the 3 of them up there banging away. And everybody's like, huh? What has happened? Cut to great commotion toward the front of the stage. He had a sneaky cordless, which was like unbelievably high tech in those days, right? He had a cordless guitar with a radio transmitter, right? Yeah. This is the 70s. And Bon is carrying Angus on his shoulders like a child. And Angus is furiously headbanging. screaming away a solo, and he comes right through the crowd like that, like the circus, and like vaudeville, and went right through the crowd and went right back on the other way. And people were just like, yes, you know, it was the most better than pyrotechnics, better than if they'd you know how later during thunderstruck, it would just be the bombs going off. There was no flash pots, nothing. They were straight stripped down band with crappy lighting, and it was really exciting because they're rock and roll. I mean, you know, they're rock and rollsy. And then Ronnie Montrose came on, and we split to show our contempt for him not ever being able to follow how awesome. So cut to, I'm drunk, and it's the 90s in England, and I come home late, and we've just gotten cable in the 90s in England when they got cable, the 90s.
Yeah.
And our neighborhood got it. So we got it. So now we had all these channels like the Fashion Channel, and there was some channel that just showed old shows. And I'm kind of high. I've come home from a gig. I turn on the TV, and it's AC/DC from 1978. And as I watch, it was at a university in England. It was, you know, like at some really crap, like Doncaster or something, you know, Huddersfield, you know, it was,
yeah.
And as I'm listening to the set, I realize I saw this set.
Wow.
This is the set I saw, right? Because they did a song called The Jack,
yeah,
which is about having venereal disease, which Bon explained at great length to the audience. And one of the more romantic moments of the show. And I recalled the actual order of the song they played. It was all, you know, the first three albums. So they did Sin City, and, you know, it was all very exciting. Anyway, that's a long, boring story. But later, of course, when I moved to San Francisco, people would pretend to be English for real, like as a kind of a sideline. This is in the late 70s, early 80s. You'd meet people, and they'd be like, yeah, how's it going? And be like, I worked with a girl at a tchotchke store in the 80s, and she affected a Susie and the Banshees, which was a very popular look for women, young women in the 80s in San Francisco. White face, kabuki makeup, black crazy goth hair, long dresses, boots, jewelry, you know, as Cliff Richard said, she's just a devil woman. And I can't remember her real name, but she went by Natalie or something. And she told, you know, and then years later I saw her, and I go, hi, how are you? And she's like, good. And I'm like, and then I realized, of course, at one point she told me she was from Santa Rosa. But she had spent several years acting English, which was a thing. Then I moved to England, and I started to pick up the accent a little bit. And my wife said to me, stop, don't be Madonna or whatever. It wasn't Madonna then, but it was like, she said, they don't want you to be one of them. The reason why they like you is you're the other. And I was like, right. So I picked up the lingo, which I use constantly and very annoyingly, because I'll say, we bowled in or push on or, you know, that kind of thing. Just because they have so many great phrases.
Yeah. It
like people like people are wet, or one that people really like is fuck straight off.
Someone pointed out to me over there that you can basically take any noun, add an ed to it, and it will mean drunk. Because I love that they call it trolleyed.
Trolleyed, yeah. My favorite one is from Scotland, which doesn't follow that rule, sadly. Steamboats.
Nice.
I was told that by a cab driver in Edinburgh, and I'm like, steamboats? Yeah. And then the other one, the Scottish, pished, which if they say in a Glaswegian accent, pushed. Glasgow's pretty impenetrable. I get a guy give me a cocktail towel, a tea towel that has it says Glasgow patter by the way. And my favorite one is let me have a turn, and then in Glaswegian, give us a go. Give us a go. Give us a go. But they speak it rapidly and with no enunciation, and then they drink a lot, and so now you're drunk, and now you can't understand it, and you have to just. I've spent many nights going.
Yeah.
But I find the Glaswegian crowd is the most challenging comedy crowd in the world. I love them the most because That's the only place I'm nervous before I go on.
Really?
Not for the podcast, for stand-up.
Yeah.
Because stand-up's strategic and specific. The podcast, I know they're going to go with me because I'm going to talk about them and make fun of them. And they love that because they want to be whipped. But with the stand-up, I'm always like, ugh. If you start making bad jokes or you tell a couple in a row that fucking suck, Glaswegians will be like, what the fuck? Like they just don't, they're not having it. They want, you know, they want you to have rehearsed and they want, and know where are people from. You can't do any of that shit. Like if you asked a Glaswegian what they did for a living, they go, I'm a comedian and I'm more successful than you. You know, like they'll just come right at you. Yeah. And so you can't fuck with them. You can mess with them, but you can't, you know, combat their. You know, the last time I did, I was real nervous and I was playing a church. Of course, there's always a converted church with a pub in it, which I love. I've played 2 or 3 of them. It's just the best idea. It's so Scotland though, isn't it? It's like a you know, religion and drink. Together in one. And right. And then if there was only like a football pitch and a bad metal group like Nazareth or Run Rig or something, you know. And I was nervous as the dickens. I'm outside and, you know, I'm smoking a joint. I'm looking at my set. And I get on and it just went, I got a standing ovation at the end. And I was like, never prouder of myself. Because I did a set the year before where I came out and tried to improvise at one point. Like there was an interval and I came back out and I had a book or something someone had given me. And I thought, oh, I'll just wow them with some of my off the top of my head shit. And this was, you know, 5 minutes of that. And finally I just, because you have to be honest with them, I go, okay, this isn't going very well. Let me be the first to notice. But we're moving on now and it's going to be funny from here on out, and then right back into the jokes. And then they're all right. So I quite enjoy it there. I didn't get to play stand up there last year, but we did do Nightmare Before Christmas there. And in this big arena that Rod Stewart played the night before. How's that for Scotland?
Oh, wow.
I saw Rod Stewart too in high school. And Scottish crowd, you know, just fucking. And I played there so long because I've been playing Scotland since 1993. I've only missed maybe 1 or 2 years. And Glasgow, Edinburgh every year almost, and Glasgow many times over the years. And toured, of course, around Scotland. So I'm known to them.
Nice.
And so a lot of them come see Nightmare Before Christmas, and all of a sudden I pop up on stage and they're like, what
are you doing here?
Yeah. And what I love about Scottish people is like they'll go online or whatever and say how great the show was, and they'll go, and Greg Proops was there too, so there was extra value. Like you got more for your ticket. You didn't expect that you get that £2 that £2 incremental bump that I provide with my low wattage.
Very nice.
Right? Oh, hey, Greg Proops was there. I forgot he fucking sang in the show. Oh, and I get to wear fez, which is just sensational.
That does sound like fun.
Yeah, a fez is also singing with the orchestra. Is like, talk about rock and roll. It's so loud. I'm right next to the conductor, so I'm you and you're me. So that's what the cues are like.
Oh, wow.
And he sings them, John Mocherry. He sings them with me. So we sing them together. We sing the songs together. And behind us is all the violas. So when the show starts, it goes, right? And it comes right through your chest, you know, because we're right in front of them. So all the strings are right behind the singers. So it's just sensational. And there's gongs and bells and a celesta, you know, that Christmas noise is a celeste. And I really like in Tokyo, they had like 4 or 5 timpanists going at once. And it was just, so when they get to the big parts of the soundtrack, it was boom, 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 boom. It's just fantastic. Yeah. And then in Glasgow, our conductor's named John Mocherry. And when the Glaswegian orchestra would ask a question, they go, oh, June, I have a question. On the second part of the, and John had conducted the Glaswegian National Opera for 8 years. So he understood Glaswegian and he spoke it. He could, our August conductor with his white hair and his glasses and his tuxedo could go, "Hey, Jimmy, who took a shot in the hood of the fucking," like he could curse in Glasgow. Really gay. So it's a fun place. Really rough, man.
Yeah.
I mean, rough and tough.
You
Which makes it, sorry, rough and tough places are often really fun to play because the crowd's spunky.
Yeah, and if you win them over, it feels like an accomplishment.
Right?
You mentioned gongs. I never got to see it, but Alex Van Halen used to have a gong that he would set on fire behind him, which I just thought was amazing. Do you ever see Van Halen?
No, I never saw Van Halen. In the early 80s when they were really huge, I was probably going to like English Beat or Elvis Costello. I was a little more on that tip. There was when I went to San Francisco State in the late 40s, Bill Graham was alive, and his company was called Bill Graham Presents instead of, what is it now, Live Nation or something. Anyway, a way to rip students off and yet let you see a free show, which you'll do when you're 19 and 20, right? You'll do anything for free. Yeah. So there'd be on the bulletin board at school, the bulletin board, tonight, like for instance, Nina Hagen. You remember Nina Hagen, the awesome star from Germany, same period, early 80s, late 70s. And you can go to the show for free. You're an usher. You have to bring a flashlight and wear black and be at the show at 7, right? The show starts at 8 or whatever. So we'd all take the bus over from State, right, to the Fillmore, because it was at the Kabuki Theater, which was right in the corner from the Fillmore, as I was describing to you earlier. And you'd all be stood up in a line like Downton Abbey, and the Bill Graham person would go, "You go upstairs, you go here, you go there, you go there. You have to seat people through the first whatever, and then you can fuck off and do what you like," right? Really? So okay, right? Yeah, I'm telling you, you didn't get a Coke. Oh, nothing. So I did. I did Nina Hagen. I did Boomtown Rats. I think Boomtown Rats, right?
Feel like Monday.
Boy, but Nina Hagen was great. It was largely funk, and the guitar player, I remember, had an asymmetrical bob. And before the show, when we were getting this theater ready and going to our sections, and we were all standing there together, Nina Hagen came out with her baby in a baby carriage and her giant white hair and her enormous eye makeup and her leather outfit, and walked by us and went, "Oh." So really, she was just a mom on the road at that point. But her range was astonishing. She would, she could do a man's voice like this, and then, whoa, like the opera. I didn't see Van Halen, but I before he passed, and he was a lovely man. I only got to meet him a couple times. Oh, wow. A guy named Keith Emerson from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So Keith Emerson would set his keyboard on fire, right, and play with the keyboard on fire. It's like, how do you do it? So when I met him, I'm with Fee Waybill from the Tubes. He's the lead singer of the Tubes, again, 70s, early 80s. Yeah. And he's a lovely guy, and the Tubes are still a group. So he was invited to do Mark and Brian's Rockin' Christmas or whatever. This was several years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And it was a super group with Slash, Rob Halford, Keith Emerson on keyboard. Can't remember who was on drums. And Jeff Porcaro from Toto and a million groups on guitar. Jeff Porcaro and not Jeff, yeah. Am I getting it right? No, Steve, I'm blanking on his name. Fee wrote Talk to You Later with this guitar player. And so that was the number he was doing. It was like a rock and roll show. Like everyone was coming out and doing one number, right? And then after them, Foreigner came out and did a set, and Heart came out and did a set, right? Wow. I told you it was Mark and Brian's Rockin' Christmas. So afterward, we repaired to the bar. And by the way, I've hated Foreigner my whole life. I watched them that night, and there was only one member from the original group, and they were great. And I remember turning to Fee and being like, I can't. I never thought I'd enjoy this. And you know the words, because you know the words. Yeah. You already know that. I've been waiting for a girl. So we're now in the bar, and Keith and I are drinking together. We're chatting. And he's like, oh, he's a little drunk. I love you on Whose Line Is It Anyway? I don't know how you guys make that up, right? It's like, it's off the top of the head. Me, it's like, no one's told you what to say. You fucking think of it, don't you? And he has a vest on, no shirt, like a shark medallion, tinted shades, long hair, epaulets. Just awesome. Harry. And he takes his wine. He's drinking wine. We're both drinking wine in a plastic glass. And he goes like this with it because he's gesticulating as he speaks. And a woman walks by and goes, Keith, and tilts his glass back up like that. And I go, the wine patrol, they're everywhere. And he goes, see, did you say the wine? I mean, you just fucking thought of that, didn't you? So he says to me, Greg, I met Dave Brubeck. And I'm like, how'd that go? And he said to me, Keith, I want to know one thing. How'd you play with the keyboard on fire? So he gave me his business card, which I still have. And it says Keith Emerson, keyboardist, composer. And it's a picture of him playing with the fire. And he came to the podcast once of Bar Lubitsch, and he was really lovely. He's just a lovely guy. Sadly, he's passed, but that made me really laugh. That Dave Brubeck's one question to Keith Emerson wasn't, because you remember Keith Emerson had like 5 keyboards, right? There'd be like 2 over here and a piano and a thing, and they played classical music too, if you recall.
Oh yeah.
Emerson and Palmer played classical music on stage for teenagers.
Are you familiar with the film Listomania?
I don't think I've ever seen the whole thing, but bits and bobs certainly.
It's mind blowing. Rick Wakeman as a reanimated Viking, and Ringo Starr as the Pope, and Roger Daltrey is
this list. He has like a Rolling Stones big penis, doesn't he? At one point, one of like the Stones had on that tour. Yeah, the very unfortunate penis. I should go back and revisit. Ken Russell's always out of control. His movies are sometimes they're staggeringly imaginative, and other times you're like, are you just trying to kind of freak me out every second here? And I think the answer is both.
Yeah.
Because there's Tommy, which is really I don't know that I've ever seen it again. I saw it when it came out. We went to this giant theater in San Diego, 75 millimeter, whatever, and the surround sound, the whole. People were losing their minds. I got kind of bored of the perviness didn't really carry it for me. But then the Who are pervy.
That's true. When you were living in were you living in San Francisco when A View to a Kill came out?
I was not only living there, I'm an extra in it. Really? Me and another comedian named Bob Rubin spent an entire night. I think we got $25 each. It was a freezing night in San Francisco. It was 1984, 5?
Yeah, and, before came out in 85.
Yeah, we were all lined up down Market Street on either side, and we were supposed to be the crowd watching this enormous police chase. So that's all we did all night. The third unit director told us to shut up and then make noise here and go, and they just drove cars up and down the street for 5 hours. And I believe we were paid 25 in cash on the night. It's my recollection.
Wow.
Might have been 50. Yeah. And I had bright orange fluorescent gloves to keep warm, because I worked at a tchotchke shop called Red Peppers, and that's the kind of shit we sold. Like, we sold shirts that said relax and fluorescent stuff.
Yeah.
Because it was the 80s. So by then we were into the super graphics and mesh Bundeswehr t-shirts and wife beaters and little German bags, and yeah.
As a man who's fond of wearing suits and drinking vodka, are you a Bond fan?
I am. Jennifer and I were talking about, my wife and I were talking about it the other day, how completely and hopelessly outdated the entire idea is, and how you have to just set that aside. And
yeah.
Well, because Sean died, and Sean has some invincible things he said about treating women abusively. And however, having said that, he was a hero of mine when I was little. He might have been the first star like I really, really loved, because I got to see Dr. No or something when I was like 4 or 5. You know, my dad took me to all, my sister took me.
Nice.
And then I would go on my own. I remember seeing Thunderball on my own. You Only Live Twice on my own with my friends. We go to the theater and just, you know, it had the gadgets and the chicks. And I was 6, 7, second grade. How old are you in second grade? 7?
Yeah.
And I had to go to Sunday school that year for some reason. My mother got a notion that it would be real important for me to get some church in. I didn't mind it because, you know, it was Bible stories and there was always food and shit. And it got kind of freaky, which I liked. People tell stories about being run over and then getting back up again after they were run over. Like, that didn't really happen. It was, I remember a guy telling a story about that. Like, and it was like, because of the power of the Lord and shit. And I was like, no. So, yeah. And I liked the picture, you know, I liked the Bible stories because it was all set in Roman times, because I really liked the Roman, you know, I'd already made the connection as a child from the movies that the Romans had a lot going on with the Jesus thing. And they bought me a little suit, and it was a navy blue suit with a white shirt and this clip-on tie. And I'd wear it to church with dress shoes. And then when church was over, which is what, the afternoon or whatever, I'd go, can I keep the suit on? My mother would be like, yeah. I'm like, I just need to wear it the rest of the day. And then I'd get my Star Trek tracer gun and all around the apartment building, in the pool, just fucking shooting other kids with the tracer gun. But when you have the suit on, my small mind equated James Bond, Sean Connery, the suit, the gun. It was all what you could aspire to be as a 7-year-old. And then a friend of my dad's bought me the James Bond kit that was an attaché that opened up. A knife came out one end, then it opened up. Then there was a radio that turned into a machine gun and a camera that turned into a Luger. Yeah.
Nice.
That was pretty hot stuff.
What's your favorite Bond?
You didn't get an asked, huh?
What's your favorite Bond theme?
We've been discussing that a lot lately too, because we had to pick a few to play the other day. I'm partial to Thunderball only because it's not popular and no one ever plays it. And the words are kind of weird, but I love how Tom Jones sings it. I think the two best are probably the Shirley Bassey ones, Goldfinger and Diamonds Are Forever. I think the Diamonds Are Forever is a classy little song.
And
the Carly Simon one, whatever. Moonraker.
I love that. Shirley Bassey again.
Exactly. I was glad they brought her back a bunch of times. I thought it was great. The other one I really love is License to Kill, because it has nothing to do with Bond at all. It's just awesome that they got Gladys Knight to do it. And I don't know if you watched that versus between Gladys Knight and Patti LaBelle earlier this year. It's been making the Containment, you know, bearable. They did like what's that? Like an Instagram Live or whatever, but it was called Versus. That, you know, different people match up against each other. Wow. And they sat in chairs and a DJ plays their music and they just sing all their hits one after the next. And she sang fucking License to Kill. And then I made Jennifer listen to it, because there's a curry on Dean Street right around the corner from Whose Line's executive offices on Burke Street that we always ate at. It was cheap and shitty, and we just guzzle beer because it was open late. The only places you could get beer late in those days. Mm. And the only record they had was License to Kill, the album, I think. Because every 15, 20 minutes, you heard License to Kill. And my English friend Paul pointed out to me the first time we went there, and we always, like you say, you always got the same thing. My recollection is I always got onion bhaji and lamb kagosht. Anyway, he pointed out to me that on every single chorus, Gladys Knight goes, "I've got a license to kill." So have a listen, because I'm pretty sure she does. And she never doesn't do it. And it just makes it. I think You Only Live Twice is a good theme.
Yeah.
I like the original one where there's no music, where it's just.
And the instrumental for On Her Majesty's Secret Service is just awesome. Yeah.
That movie's not that bad. I mean,
that was the first one I saw, so I'm very partial to it. But Diana Rigg.
That's what I was going to say. It has the best of all of the possible girls, as they call them. But My dad took me to see that in the movie theater. I remember very well. And also, no one ever talks about it, but Mike Myers' Dr. Evil is Telly Savalas.
Yeah.
Combined with Donald Pleasance from You Only Live Twice.
Yeah.
He's bald. He has a monocle. He has a scar. He wears a, Yeah. He's, last time I watched it, I was like, God, he just stole every beat.
A friend of mine actually wants to start a band called Dalton, where everyone dresses as Timothy Dalton and they play the tunes from the two Dalton Bond movies. Because, there were auxiliary ones besides the theme as well, but this License to Kill thing is going to make this rather interesting.
Yeah, License to Kill. And what's the other one he's in? Something Daylights?
Living Daylights, which Aha did the theme.
Oh, God, you're right. I saw it in the theater. I'm almost sure I did. Some of them passed me by because I saw them once in the theater and I don't, like, there's a bunch I watch over and over on TV, like Promotion with Love is unmissable. And the other day I was watching part of Thunderball, which isn't exactly captivating, but the French actress who's in it is absolutely stunning.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to, I don't know, on my memory. Anyway, and then lately, of course, the one with Christopher Lee and Roger Moore.
Man with Golden Gun.
The Man with Golden Gun, because it's hokey and it combines every crap element, and I just love that one. What does Christopher Lee say? Here's to us, Mr. Bond, the best at what we do. I love a woman in a bikini, no hidden weapons. Yeah, the sexism is just awesome. It's overwhelming. I
love Roger Moore, but like as Bond, like it's basically all one-liners.
Yeah. Oh no, he's like at a cocktail party.
But were you a Persuaders fan? That TV show? I love that.
Me too. Jennifer really loves it too. The thing about them is that they're both slightly overweight and really too tanned and kind of sleazy. And you feel bad for like all the women that had to be on the show because it had to be a grabby affair. I mean, that show just exudes. Speaking of, they always wore like little, yeah, baby. It was really, they were on the Riviera, was it all the time?
Yeah, they just sort of gallivanted around Europe, and then maybe a crime would come up that they had to solve.
Right. It was super sexy situation. It was like the logical extension of I Spy, because I Spy was kind of like, what if two sleazy dudes just sleazed around foreign countries? But I Spy didn't have the breadth and scope of sleaze that the Persuaders did, because they could actually go to Spain or whatever and be like, girls would go by and they'd just be like, wow, and you're like, what? I know an actor named Ian Ogilvy, and he, after Roger Moore's first excellent Saint, they did a series in the 70s called The New Saint, like they did the New Avengers. Yeah. And Ian Ogilvy played it. And Ian Ogilvy's a really lovely guy, very funny and smart. But he's got like the low-waisted hip huggers and the mustache and the tight shirts that are buttoned down to there, and the fucking sports car, and he just drives around Europe, and like there's no plot at all. Right? This is the new thing. He's like talk about hoping a crime happens. Like there's definitely a chick, and and then you get out of your car and like smoke and hang around for a while, and like it was just great. And he's giving it zero, commitment. It's awesome. It's really awesome. Those kind of shows are great fun. But again, you have to be. Sorry.
Speaking of Christopher Lee, I watched Dracula AD 1972 recently.
I know when you watched it because I watched it with Jennifer. It was on last month. It was on in October.
Oh, was it? I actually rented it.
No, you didn't.
I had never seen the whole thing, and I was just like, because someone reminded me that the Danish translation, if you translate it back into English, is Dracula chases hot pants.
That's right. Well, that's what it is. It's also the way they set him up in the very beginning, and then they don't bring him back until ever, and then he has no lines, and then he goes to the teenage crucifixion where the one weirdo Charles Manson-y dude keeps pressing too hard. And I watched that one for a variety of reasons. It's kind of my wife's. She loves that genre, the Profondo Rosso Italian films and the Hammer horror is a big thing around Halloween here. Oh, so we watched Dracula AD 72. We watched The Orderlock with Boris Karloff. We watched some of them almost stop completely like statues. The movies are so slow paced.
Yeah.
AD 72 is kind of groovy because there's that whole drink my blood, take drugs, and hang around with a bunch of kids. Yeah, the music's good. The opening sequence where Van Helsing is chasing him is and then the jet flies over because to indicate that we've jumped to modern times. Oh yeah, and the outfits in it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, that's pretty groovy little. I'm not a big horror person because I don't like violence against women and I don't like gore that much. So I'm never a big Texas Chainsaw or Saw or any or movies where women are tied up. I'm always like, whoa. So having said that, I've been, rewatching every movie of all time, as I'm sure we all have. And movies that you watch, like a month or two ago, I watched Moonstruck and I was like, I really love this movie. Like, I didn't know I loved it. I remember watching it. I remember thinking it was funny. And I watched it again. I'm like, now I'm crying, Function of getting older and being in isolation, I think.
Yeah. What else has been like keeping you going during a lockdown like that?
Oh, my wife, she's been cooking up a storm and
nice.
She made bread today and we do the podcast together every Sunday and it's at gregproops.com. That helps me move along. I've been able to do a lot of shows. I've done shows like every week and live stand-up shows, and we're doing like a Who's Live show on the 12th. I'm doing my podcast on the 9th at the Nowhere Comedy Club. But I don't know about you, but trying to go back and work on stuff that I'd previously made and edit it and put it together has not happened. And that's been since March.
Yeah.
I have a big bunch of recordings that I've got to go through and fix. Now they're going to be dated. And I just haven't, I've listened to them all, but I haven't been able to do the physical work of like, for some reason I cannot focus. And I don't know if that's just me or
the world.
We're all a little anxious. And we're in California. And so the governor the mayor of Los Angeles yesterday said, if you can help it at all, don't go out. This is as bad as it's going to get. And we're like, okay. It doesn't really make you want to go, party.
Yeah.
But having said that, we're safe. I'm privileged. We're alive. I've got a dazzling variety of cheap ornaments that I bought. So I'm trying to stay happy. And how about you? Are you reading anything good?
What's big thing been keeping me going this year? P.G. Woodhouse novels.
Oh, nice.
I got really into them this winter, and the audiobooks are fantastic because it's the proper British actors reading them.
So who is it? Stephen Fry, and who does the P.G. Woodhouse?
There's like three main ones.
Right.
It's escaping my mind.
That's okay. My memory's so faulty today. I can't believe it.
But they're hilarious.
I know. I need to go back. Again, Jennifer gave me a bunch of Evil and Watt at the beginning of this.
Oh, nice.
And it is still sitting where I put it in April.
Have you read any before?
Yeah. I'd read Love One and I think Decline. I have a detective author named James Crumley who I love, and I went back and reread every single one of his novels. Nice. They're all set in Montana and the Northwest and Texas, and they're all very cokey and lots of firearms. It's just great. And they're all middle-aged guys. It's never, it's got all veterans, shattered veterans who are middle-aged guys. So I love it. And I don't know why. I don't relate to any of it. And I'm reading a book that I dug out of somewhere. It's George Stevens Jr. His father was George Stevens, the filmmaker who made Diary of Anne Frank and Greatest Story Ever Told and all the screwball comedies, Woman of the Year and whatnot. And his son taught a film class at UCLA in the 70s, and he got everyone to come in. Men. It's all men. So it's Howard Hawks, Ray Harryhausen, John Ford, Sajid Rai, Ingmar Bergman, Raoul Walsh, William Wyler, Stanley Kramer. So every film director that made, Gene Kelly, So It's just interviews with all of them. So it's very racially not diverse. I think there's 2 people who aren't white guys. James Wong Howe, the cinematographer, who is from LA, and then Sajid Rai is Indian and or Bengali, and there's no women. But it's pretty interesting anyway, because they talk about all these, like Howard Hawks says he was going to make Casablanca and Curtiz was going to make this other one. Sergeant York, and they switched. And so he ended up making Sergeant York, and Curtiz made Casablanca. And he said, I wouldn't have been able to do anything with Casablanca, too stagey. And I thought, fuck you, old man. It's only the most popular movie ever. Too stagey my ass. No one watches Sergeant York at Christmas. All right, I'm going to have to jump off here in a minute.
Yeah, it's great talking to you, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate it. Will you tell me when it posts and we'll tweet it and all that jazz?
Awesome. Yeah, it should be Monday. Do you want to plug anything before we go?
Yeah. Once again, if you go to gregproops.com, I'll be doing my podcast December 9th. You can also, that's a live version from right here at the Porpoise of Fruitude with all the Christmas lights, and it'll be a Christmas spooktacular. And then every week on Monday or Tuesday, the podcast drops, The Smartest Man in the World, my wife Jennifer and I. And on December 12th, Who's Live Anyway? That'll be at houseseats.com, or you can go to Greg Proops, and the link is there. And I'm going to do a New Year's show probably with Ben Glebe, who's a comedian friend and mine here in Los Angeles. We often do improv shows together over the Zoom, so that'll get posted soon. And I have 1 million albums. You can buy all of those and keep me afloat during this time, because I haven't had a chance to really tour much. I was on the road 200 and something days last year.
Oh,
This year,
were there any before?
Yeah, we gigged up till March 8th was the last gig I did. Then March 12th, we went out to play down here in Southern California. And by noon, Gavin Newsom had restricted all gatherings of over 1,000 people. And so the theaters between noon and 3 o'clock all canceled one after the next. They had to.
Yeah.
And that was the last time we gigged. So my last gig was in Swinomish Casino in Anacortes, Washington. It was a fun gig. And then we played Seattle Lemoore Theater. Well, we shouldn't have played those places. You know what? The pandemic was already going, and especially in Washington State in those early days. I felt scared that we did a gig with 1,500 people at it in Seattle, but it was early days. There was only a few dozen cases then.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, we had 75 dates booked. I probably had 100 and something dates on the book this year before it all went to. But you know what? Don't cry for me, Argentina.
No, let's end on
We'll be
something
back.
positive. Yes. Excellent.
Yeah, we'll be back.
All right. Thank
We'll
you.
put it on hold for a while until we get shit under control.
Actually, the last gig I went to before lockdown was David Lee Roth and Kiss at the Staples Center. And it was fantastic. And you know how they're calling Dr. Love, and Paul Stanley always says, who's got rock and roll pneumonia?
Yeah.
There's something with virus.
That's just fantastic. Kiss. My friend Matt Weinhold was at a show in Sacramento, and he was a huge Kiss fan. And he said, I was, what was his joke? I was in the Kiss army when I was little. Who were we going to go to war with, ABBA? He goes, at one point, the show, Paul goes, we just voted Sacramento the rock and roll capital of California. And Matt turns to his friends and go, and to think we were here. And then what was the other one? We don't have any feminists out there tonight, do we? Yes. I saw them too, of course.
Awesome.
But I'm leaving you on that note. For next time, we'll talk about Kiss next time.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thanks, Southpaw.